Hi guys, today we're going to talk about producers and consumers. These two vocabulary words go along with the words we were working with last week. Needs, wants, goods, and services. It's still in our economic unit. Producers and consumers are, if you look at slide number 2, are both people, and a buyer is also called a consumer. They are people who buy the goods and services we talked about last week. And a producer is also called a seller, who is a person who makes a good or a service. So a consumer, is someone who buys something. Like if you go to a grocery store on the weekend, or if you go to a fair or some type of craft festival and you purchase things, you would be considered a consumer. Now, a producer is someone who makes something. So a farmer who makes cheeses, or a dairy cow makes milk. And then the farmer might make different things like the cheese or different products on their farm, would be the producer. Or at that craft festival or a fair, a local fair, people make things and then sell them. They would be considered the producer of those goods and services that are provided. So at the bottom here, once you read along, they're giving you the example of the lemonade stand. If you are the person making the lemonade, or let's pretend maybe it's a cookie stand, if you are making the lemonade or the cookies, you would be considered the producer, because you are making it and you are providing it for someone else. Almost like the service we talked about last week. However, if you're on the opposite side of the stand and you're the person buying the cookie, or you are buying the lemonade, which is considered the good that we talked about last week, you would be considered the consumer. You are consuming those goods. On slide 3, there's a word at the top called a resource. Now, there's different types of resources you're going to read about today. If you look at the first bold word, it's just plain resource. And a resource is anything that is needed to produce the goods and services we talked about. A resource are just items that you need to make things. But a different type of resource is called a natural resource. And I know you've discussed these in science. And a natural resource is anything made by nature. It's natural, made in nature. Think of the two ends together. And you'll read about natural resources that you can find out in nature. Things like plants, wood, water, anything outside that is natural. On slide 4, a different type of resources are called human resources. Human resources are the people needed to produce goods. People and human are multi-meaning words. They mean the same thing, right? Teachers, dentists, waiters, painters are all human resources. Okay, the human resources provide the labor or the activity, and labor is the physical and mental effort. Labor meaning that your body has to do something to produce the service. And capital resources are goods that are used to make other goods. So capital meaning to provide the service or good, okay? Like tools, buildings, machines. Those capital resources, or the tools, buildings, and machines, provide the resources. So there's human resources where the humans provide the resources, and then there's capital resources where tools and buildings and machines provide the resources. And as you read through these slides, it provides a little bit more detail. On slide number 5, it breaks down in 3 different categories, almost like a trifold, meaning 3. And I put in yellow arrows here where it gives you 3 different examples. There's a natural resource, a fish. There is, a fishing boat in Juneau, Alaska, where there's a capital resource because it's the fishing boat. And then you have a human resource of fishermen. So you could read a little bit more in detail there. And then you have slide number 6 here, where you need to complete the activity. Just like last week, you can please ignore this top section where I'm scanning my arrow over here. You're going to answer the question. You're going to choose a good or service that was not, do you see that? Not listed in the text. A good or service. Remember, we did that last week. A good is an item where you can physically hold or touch it, or a service is something that someone does for you or that you can buy or pay someone to do. Explain what natural, human, and capital resources are needed to produce that good or service. So you're going to choose a good or service that was not listed here and explain what natural, human, and capital resources are needed to produce that good or service. So sure, that good or service is not listed in this text here, but you can look back at all the different text evidence here that explains what the natural resources, the capital resources, or the human resource is to help support your answer. Or if you can't quite remember as you're explaining or defining your choice, you can look back to help support that and provide evidence or to remind yourself of what that means. If you need to review the video again, it's always up on slide number 1 to help you. Remember, complete sentences in slide number 6, and you want to provide the most detail and the most evidence possible. So at least 2 to 3 sentences, please.